the next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and I was in this tunnel that was like a beautiful golden, silvery, white, luminescent light. And it was just, I always try to explain it as feeling like I was in liquid love, because it felt like it was fluid, almost like a moving fluid, and it was moving around me and through me as me. So
Zach Tavcar had a near-death experience at the age of 14 while in the midst of treatment for leukemia, where he encountered a deceased relative. His experience initiated him into asking further questions about life and death, the nature of suffering, why we suffer, and why we're here. Years later, Zach began having more out-of-body experiences, as well as unintended channelings that I can't wait to ask him about, that further helped him understand his NDE and revealed answers to those questions. So currently, Zach works as a health and wellness coach, quantum healing hypnosis, QHHT practitioner, exercise physiologist, speaker, and writer. As a result of his NDE and later experiences, Zach realized his life purpose and mission, which is to help others remember their deepest hearts, the deepest place within themselves, that aspect of them that is infinite, divine oneness. So wonderful to have you. Welcome, Zach.
thank you for having me, Kristin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's just dive right in.
Okay.
You were really young when you had your NDE.
Yeah.
Can you set the stage for what was going on in your life and how that happened?
Yeah, so I was 14. I just turned, well, maybe 14 and 3 months, but I had just been diagnosed with leukemia. I was at about 3 months after my treatment, and so I was kind of in the midst of a little chaos already. And do you want me to go into the actual day, or do you want me to set some more stage for us?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I love that you paused me there, because I do want to know one thing, which is maybe not the most germane question given that you were so young, but did you or your family hold any strong spiritual or religious beliefs?
My dad's mother, so my grandmother, my paternal grandma, she was quite involved in, she was a devout Catholic, but she was also very interested and attended seminars for like Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra. So she was very interested in the mystical, if you will, the side of life, and very self-help oriented. She grew up in World War II and in Austria, so she was a young girl when World War II was going on. So I think that kind of created her to have a lot of questions about life as well. And she was deeply spiritual. My dad is spiritual. My mom's very open and all those things, but never anyone as much as I would say my grandma at that age.
And did she have a big influence over you? And that might be, again, kind of strange, because as a 14-year-old, that may or may not have an impact on her.
Yeah, she had a very big influence over me and just everyone in general. She was a wonderful person. She was a wonderful lady. Everyone had nothing but nice things to say to her and about her. So she was very impactful in my life. And even as I got sick, that relationship strengthened even deeper. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. So yeah, just take us to that day.
Okay. So that morning, I had just gotten a blood draw, so a pretty big blood draw. I had to get blood draws frequently, and I hadn't eaten anything that morning, and I was on my way to get a back brace fitting because my L2, L3, and L4, my lumbar vertebrae, had fractured from part of the treatment of leukemia with a pill called prednisone.
Yeah.
And so it had fractured, so I was on the way to get a back brace fitting, and we showed up there and started getting the fitting. He starts taking, my dimensions and all that. And as I was standing there, kind of on like a parallel bar, if you will, just supporting myself up, I started to feel a little fuzzy, a little lightheaded. And I was just thinking to myself, okay, just, stay focused, don't pass out, don't do anything silly. So just kind of, breathe through it. And my dad and the technician had known each other through music. My dad's a musician, so they were talking. And the whole time I'm just kind of like, keep my eyes open, just, all right, let's get through this. So it took about 20 to 30 minutes for him to get all of his dimensions, go back, and yada, yada. So by this time, I'm starting to get fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier. So we're walking out. My dad is with my 4-year-old brother at the time, and just, trailing behind, saying goodbye to the technician. And I just start kind of booking it, speed walking to my dad's truck. And I got to my dad's truck, and by this time the tunnel had just started to, cave in, and everything started to, go black a little bit.
Yeah.
And I sat on the lip of his truck, and he was about 40 meters away from me to my left, and he's coming around the corner, and I just looked at him and said, "Dad, I'm gonna pass." And then I went out. And the next thing I knew, I opened my eyes, and I was in this tunnel that was like a beautiful golden, silvery, white, luminescent light. And it was just, I always try to explain it as feeling like I was in liquid love, because it felt like it was fluid, almost like a moving fluid, and it was moving around me and through me as me. So it was very impactful. And I just was kind of looking around while I was feeling this love, this joy, this peace, this freedom, and just kind of existed there for, I don't know, however long. And then I looked forward, and I saw a silhouette figure of a man wearing a trench coat. And the first, thought that I had was, oh, that's my Grandpa Joe, my dad's dad, who had passed, made his transition 7 years prior. I was 7 years old, so I was 14 at the time, so 7 years prior. And so I just looked and went, oh, that's Grandpa Joe. And we had this inaudible conversation, and all I really remember him saying was, "You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. You just have to keep going." And I know there was more said, but at the time I didn't remember any of it. So we just had this inaudible conversation, and then out of nowhere, I just felt like I got sucked out, and all of a sudden I was in my body again, but my body was completely numb. And I couldn't move, but I could hear my dad saying, "Zach, Zach, are you okay? Zach, Zach, are you okay?" And then another voice of a man saying, "Do you want me to call 911? Do you want me to call 911? Is he okay?" And I couldn't move my body, but I was able to speak. And I said, "I can't move, but I'm okay. I can't really move right now, but I'm okay. I'm just tingly." And so it took me about another minute or two for what felt like my nervous system to come back online, where the tingles come back through. And then I woke up, and I saw my dad's face, and he was, terrified. My 4-year-old brother's face, who was extremely terrified, thought his brother just died.
Right in front of him, yeah.
Right, yeah. And then this man that was just a bystander who had just run over and seen it happen. But luckily, unbeknownst to me, my dad had actually turned into Usain Bolt and sprinted 40 meters as I was falling, and had caught me.
Wow.
So that was pretty impressive. I was, like, "Oh, Dad, you're Superman too."
Go, Dad.
Yeah, good for you. And
good for you.
Yeah, good for both of us. And then, because maybe I would have had a near-death experience rather than out-of-body experience. But, then we went to the worst place in the world to eat, McDonald's, right afterwards.
You needed anything to get your blood sugar up.
Exactly. And then I was concerned because my dad is quite a worrywart, and I wanted to explain that to him and my mom. What you'd seen? What I experienced, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I waited, I don't know, it's always fuzzy, but I would say about a week to 2 weeks to tell him that. And then I said, I don't want to freak you out, but when I passed out, I was in a tunnel, and I saw Grandpa Joe. And immediately, the concern is all over his face. What did he say? Did he say you were going to die? What's going on? What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. And I just said, no. He said, everything's going to be okay. Everything will be good. I just have to keep going. I just have to keep moving. And he was like, oh, okay. And so a few months later, he came to me, and I explained that I'd seen him in a trench coat. And I'd never seen my grandpa. I'd only known him for 7 years, but I'd never seen him in a trench coat before, because by that time he was wearing just like nice business suits and business
attire.
Coats. Mm-hmm. And so he gave me this picture, which I still have, and it was my grandpa when he was in his late 20s, early 30s, in Prague, where he was living, and he was in this long trench coat, and it looked exactly like, right, like I had seen him. So that was confirmation to me that I did have this conversation, because at 14, you have this weird experience. You're kind of trying to rationalize things. I hallucinated. I did this. I did that. But it was more confirmation for me that was a real experience. Yeah.
Yeah, validation. What I also love about that, and then I want to go back to that tunnel with your permission to.
Of course, yeah.
Because I know people are so curious as I am. But I hear so many people talk about NDEs, and they can go years, even decades, without telling anyone, because particularly in times before, when you were 14, people were accused of being insane, or it was, they were just told that was a hallucination, it didn't happen. But that you told your parents, and they believed you, and they embraced the message, and they honored you and the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really beautiful.
Yeah, I lucked out with 2 wonderful parents in life.
I
scored big.
You scored big time. So let's go back into that tunnel, because I have seen you, heard you interviewed before, and you give some detail, and I'll share what I heard you say.
Yeah.
So I love that this sort of like golden love and this immersive experience, that this gold and silvery and white, like you called it, like almost like curtains or oil, or just like it was so fluid is the word. It just wasn't just around you, but it went through you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you feel like you were in a body? I know it was an out-of-body experience, but were you like standing there, or was it just consciousness?
I felt somewhat tangible. So I did feel as if I had form. But it was weird because it wasn't the density that we would know now, like when the wind hits us and we feel that on our skin.
Yeah.
It was as if I had density, but it almost matched the density of what was there.
The environment.
So we were kind of, and how previous, I think it was with Shaman Oaks, he asked that same question, and how it was funny that it came to me like that, but it was like 2 different densities of water or fluid, so oil and water. Mm-hmm. And so I felt as if I was in a tunnel that was ever expanding, but the space that I felt like I was in, we could say was water. And then right outside was oil. And that water could continually expand, or vice versa, could continually expand, pushing the water or the oil outward, or let it condense. So it was a fluid. That's how it felt. If you're trying to put words to it.
I know.
It's deeper than that, but
Words are very limited. How close did you and your grandfather get? Like, could you touch him, or was this
No.
telepathy? It was just you could see him in the distance as a shadowy figure, and that's where he remained?
It wasn't super distant. Like, if I'm looking outside my window right now, I'm saying he was probably 10 meters away from me.
Okay.
So it wasn't close enough to touch, and it wasn't close enough to, even in that moment, perceive his features clearly for me. Or maybe that's just my mind not being able to remember that immersive experience. But my memory is, I would say, 10 meters away.
Okay.
Which I don't know why that was that way, but that's how it was.
Well, here, I would love to, I obviously don't know either, but where I go, having listened to and read so many near-death experiences, is that it clearly was not your time. So you sort of entered the space before, if we're going to call it heaven or the afterlife or whatever the nomenclature is. So he was basically meeting you almost at the gate, but not opening the door for you to transition in. So it was like almost like keeping you at arm's length, because it just wasn't your time.
That, I've never thought about that, Kristin, but I think you're right. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think there's something to that where I'm not allowed to cross that barrier fully just yet.
Yeah. So you saw the beginning of the route, but you didn't cross over.
Yeah.
So I want to hear, I know you got stuff about meditation, more out of body, channeling. But before we go there, I'm also really curious about subsequent communication with Grandpa Joe. Was that a one and only, or has it continued?
One and only for him.
Got it.
Yeah, my grandma, on the other hand, that's been different. Yeah, that's been different.
And is this the grandma you were referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So those are the areas. I want to hear about grandma. I want to hear about the meditation, the out of body, and channeling. So I'll just hand it to you to share your story in whatever order makes most sense.
Oh my gosh, Kristin, that's so much.
Well, it's just your life.
I guess I would say let's go through the timeline. So I began meditating at about daily at 19. And the very first time that I meditated, I had read in Abraham Hicks' book, Ask and It Is Given. And in that book, one of the main recommendation is to meditate daily. And I thought, well, I want to be healed and be done with all this treatment, because at that time I was still dealing with a thing called graft versus host disease, which is it's pretty much an autoimmune disease that you get when you have some type of organ transplantation or a bone marrow transplant, which I had. Okay. So I was 3 years out of my bone marrow transplant, but I was still having these problems. So that just showed up. So I said, like, okay, they suggest meditation. I'm going to meditate daily. So the very first time I meditated, I sat in my parents' lazy boy in their back room. I put a timer on for 20 minutes on the oven timer and laid there and did what they suggested, which was to start focusing on your breath, and as you inhale, say 1, mentally, and then exhale 1. Inhale 2, exhale 2. And whatever happens with the breath, just let it happen. Don't fight it, just observe it. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I started doing it, and within 5 minutes, I started getting very numb all over. So my fingers, and then it went up my forearms, elbows, shoulders, chest, until at about 10 minutes, I could not feel much at all except for my face. And all of a sudden, I started breathing very rapidly, naturally. Just, I guess you could call it Kundalini breathing or whatever, breath of fire. But it just started happening, just a... And then all of a sudden, I breathed out. And at this time, I can't feel anything, right? And I inhaled, and I became as big as my parents' house. And I exhaled, and I took this big breath in, and I became as big as the city of Reno. I exhaled. I became the whole earth. I exhaled. Became our galaxy. I exhaled. And then as I continued to do this and kept expanding, eventually I got to this point where I exhaled and my breath normalized. And I felt as if I was existing in the middle of the entire multiverse. And I could feel myself extending outwardly as everything. And simultaneously, I felt like I was nothing. And it felt like I was looking into the stars. I was in the center of the galaxy. And then this very, very distant noise started. Beep, beep, beep. And I was like, what in the heck is that? Where am I? And all of a sudden I went, oh my God, that's my parents' timer. I'm still in my house. And so just as I had come out, I started going back in the same way. And so the timer eventually stopped. My body was completely numb, and I started to panic a little bit, thinking, like, what happened?
Did I harm myself?
Right.
Did I get back?
Right. And then my body, just like I had when I'd passed out, started coming back online. The tingles started to come back, yada, yada, yada. And I had a little addiction to morphine in the hospital. And when I had that experience, I thought, holy crap, this is about 1,000 times more powerful and more amazing feeling than morphine. I want to keep doing this. And so
you're moving into the lazy boy recliner.
Right. so that hooked me on meditation. And then actually the very next day, I did the exact same thing in my bedroom, but this time I was laying down instead of being on the lazy boy, like laying, sitting upright. And same exact process happened. The breathing started. I was numb. And at one point, inhaled really big like that. And I heard this pop. And all of a sudden, I was in the corner of my room looking down at my body and just went, oh, and I zoomed and I just popped right back into my body. And again, took me about 10 minutes to come back online with my nervous system. But yeah, so those two were my very first two meditative experiences, and thought, this is way intense. I need to keep doing this. And
Wow.
yeah,
Most people are like, my mind was racing. I was thinking about what I
right.
needed to do for work, what I was going to have for dinner. And so you just, and this intuitive, like the Kundalini breathing, breath
Yeah.
of fire, that's fascinating. So I want to hear more, but what kind of impact did it or did it not have on your autoimmune disease?
Oh, well, once I started meditating and once I started making, particularly, understanding the I don't know, the mindset, the thought process that I was learning in these different self-help and spiritual teachers, I pretty much immediately stopped having issues with the graft versus host, and my body started to engraft a little bit better. It did have flare-ups here and there, but they weren't as extensive. And who knows if that was, the meditation, or if that was just time
Yeah.
with allowing my body to engraft. But around that time, it did start getting better. However, a few months afterwards, my hip did collapse, which I just had a hip replacement in May as a result of that. But the hip bone did collapse because I had a flare-up and had to go back on prednisone. So there, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. Like, it just helped me mentally, and it did allow my body to start engrafting until a year and a half later, and I was completely off my meds, and now I'm free of that.
Okay. And so my assumption is that you probably still have a daily meditation practice?
I do, yes.
Okay. And is each one as profound as those two? No.
Not even close.
Okay.
I have moments where there are times when I have experiences like channeling my grandma out, a year after she passed, and that happens frequently. It allows me to hear intuitively a lot better and know where I need to go. It allows me to hear my own inner voice a lot clearer. But it doesn't, I rarely have those experiences now, maybe once every few months, where I can really disconnect and let go and just be in that space. But, I'll take a few times a year over over never. Yeah.
I'm curious to learn, as you probably know, a lot of people who have NDEs, it like wakes up or triggers or activates this psychic, intuitive mediumship ability. But what I hear over and over again is up until the age of 7, we are all psychic mediums. Did you have any experiences as a young boy?
As a young boy, I always felt that something was watching me.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah, right. So you always feel like something's watching you. But I never had anything profound or transcendental. I just always could feel something watching me. I always felt like I could understand people really well, but it wasn't like I could hear, that's made me a good manipulator. I could just understand human behavior. I could hear what people were asking behind their words. I could feel,
An empath.
Empathy. Yeah, empath.
Yeah.
But empathy for me, my dad's much more of an empath than I am. My parents are probably more empathic than I am, but I can feel it, but if I feel it too much, it affects my body. So I think I came in with a sensitive body.
Yeah.
I know I came in with a more sensitive nervous system and a sensitive body. Like, that was my path to be more intuitive.
Yeah.
And so that was more what mine was.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that you came in with a sensitive body, because I feel like I did too, and I did come in as an empath and being able to sort of intuit what people are thinking and feeling beyond the words that they're choosing. But when we first got started, I always asked people what I can do to make sure they're as comfortable as possible being interviewed, and you said, wherever I go, I'm comfortable. And for me with the sensitive nervous system, that's not always the case. Is that something through meditation that you've been able to cultivate, or is that always, even with a sensitive body, something that you've been able to experience?
I think that's I think that's two parts. It's probably part of my conditioning. My mom's side of her family is very much that way. And the only reason I'm successful, I feel like, in anything that I do is because I'm good at mimicking. I'm very good at mimicking. So I was a good athlete because I could mimic the best players. I'm a good communicator because I can mimic what I hear people saying, and I can, like, obviously can hear what they're saying behind the words. But as a young boy, I could see the really effective people that were making an impact on others, and then I just mimicked them. So my mom is a great communicator. My dad is a good communicator too, but he's just more he's more empathetic for sure, and he's more emotional. And then my mom's brother, my favorite uncle, he was very much a people person. Like, everywhere he went, people loved him, and he made everyone smile. And and same with my mom and my dad too, and when he's not in his overly emotional states.
Yeah.
But so I would mimic that behavior. So I think it's part mimicking, and I think I chose those people because I needed to use those tools later in life to share more and be a better messenger.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they were modeling that, and you were a good student.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Obviously. So, channeling grandma, year after she passes.
Yeah. So channeling grandma, that was probably my third or fourth channeling. I was just meditating, and I had a brief thought of her, and instantly she popped right in, and she was 30 years old. So I'd seen her when she died. I saw her at the funeral, and she was smiling, and she was young, 30, which is funny. But she was smiling, and she was very sassy, and I always knew how sassy my grandma was. Mm-hmm. But she was like extra sassy, and I was like, ooh, I love it. No wonder I've got a little spice to me. But she was so sassy and just smiling and exuding this love. And I saw her over her casket, and then when we went into the field to bury her, I saw her from probably about 50 yards away, and all of a sudden I swore there were 20 to 50 dragonflies just flying around, and I'm looking over at my wife and my brothers and my mom, and I go, do you guys see these dragonflies? And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, there's like 50 dragonflies just flying all over the place. And they go, I don't know.
They didn't see it.
No, I was that kind of freaked me out because I was tangibly seeing dragonflies.
That
everywhere.
Is really creepy when you're like, you don't see that?
Yeah, how do you not see all these dragonflies? But yeah, and then she zoomed in and was smiling and stuff. But over her casket, I was smiling. I wasn't crying. And my mom looks over at me, and this is my dad's mom, and she goes, "You can see Grandma, can't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she just started bawling.
Aww.
But anyway, so that was the first time I saw her.
Was she floating?
Yeah, she was floating.
Okay,
which was weird. Yeah, she's floating over her casket, just kind of like checking everything out. It's very weird. But then in the field, when she zoomed in, she was like floating hovering off the ground, like right off the ground. But anyway, so I'm meditating. My grandma comes in. Right after that, my favorite uncle, who I just said, my mom's brother, he had passed suddenly also he had a blood clotting factor that I actually also have. And he came in at the same time. So I had my grandma on my right and my uncle on my left. And my grandma says, I need you to tell your dad this. And I need you to tell him that he was the light of my life, that he made, and I feel bad saying that if my aunt ever sees this, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's not your message. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is. It's not my message. Yeah, and she said, I need you to tell him that he was the light of my life, that he was the love of my life, and that I'm so grateful that I got to be his mother and that I had him as a son. And it was like so like clear, like I was not going to forget that. And then my uncle Paul, so my grandma's name is Olga, my uncle is Paul. My Uncle Paul said, I need you to tell your mom that she just needs to quiet down and she can hear me. But she's too noisy in her head. She's too noisy in her own mind. And that's why she can't hear what I'm trying to tell her. Because she would dream about him all the time and all these. And she's I think my mom, if she would just meditate, she would be deeply, channeling. But she just
it's a
won't take
choice.
the time.
It's a choice, and it's a discipline. Yeah.
For sure. So that was So that was that
Okay,
experience.
it's not that because I have questions about that.
Yeah.
So there are all these different clairs, right? There's clairvoyance and there's
Right.
clairsentience. So you see them, you hear them. How else do you experience them? It's not just a disembodied voice, but is it sometimes? So it's never a disembodied voice. They're actually in front of you visually, and they're talking, and you can hear them.
In those experiences, yes.
Okay.
Sometimes I will hear, so the first two times, well, excuse me, the first time I channeled, it was completely a voice and a
And
feeling.
it's not your voice.
No, it's somebody else's voice in my head. Yeah, it's hard to I think when I say this, because when I was a kid, I remember thinking, man, these people are crazy,
Right.
who talk about this stuff. And then when it happens to you, you're like, it's weird, and you don't know how to articulate it clearly because it is strange. But the way I feel, the way I experience it is I first experience a deep, profound emotion for whoever I'm writing to.
So you write when you're doing it.
I always write.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll write. And usually it's like I'm just typing. I don't tend to, if I write.
Oh,
if
so
I,
you're on a keyboard.
I'm on a keyboard.
Okay.
Yeah, so the very first time that happened, I was meditating like 2 or 3 times a day, and my dad's, a friend of my dad's, her son had passed, transitioned, and she knew my story, and I was 23. I was 23, and she asked if I had had any near-death experiences or any profound experiences. So I was like, yeah, let me write it back to her. And so I shared with her the experience I had with my dad, or with my grandpa. Finished that, and as soon as I finished that, I had this overwhelming love for this woman who I had met one time in my life for 5 minutes, and gratitude for her, and I just heard, keep writing. So I'm not a fast typer. I'm maybe slow even. I'm average. So I'm typing, and I swear to God, my hands were going 2 to 3 times faster than I thought they ever could on a keyboard. And it was like these impulses and feeling, and I was just, and so I wrote it out, and I reread it, and I was like, okay, that was weird. That was real trippy. So I sent it off to her. She replied the next day and said, that was amazing. Can I share it with his friends and family? I said, of course. And I don't want to creep you out or freak you out, but that second half of that message was your son, like, talking to you. And she said, oh my God, I was going to ask you if there was any way that was possible, because last week I asked him to write me a letter telling me where he was and how he was doing. Right? And I was like, okay, this is getting weird. And I got the heebie-jeebies because I never met him.
It gave you heebie-jeebies.
Right? Oh, yeah. I was like, ooh, that is freaky weird. Like, I'm opening up something in myself that I don't know if I'm really that comfortable doing. Because it was weird, like having somebody. But it was, it wasn't bad. It was just, it was weird that I could be a vessel for somebody to give a letter. And I remember reading the letter, and the letter was, this place is so beautiful. I am so grateful that you were my mother. I cannot explain how much love and gratitude I have for you because of what you allowed me to, like the life you allowed me to live, and how you support, and just like this long letter. Wow. And yeah. And then that happened again with a friend of mine once he had accidentally, well, I won't say anything, but he died. And so his mom sent me a message. The exact same thing happened to me. But the difference with him was it sounded like he was a megaphone in my head. So the other one was like a quieter voice, but deep emotion. This one was deep emotion with a megaphone in my head. And I think it was just because him and I were very close friends in college, and we had more of a
relationship.
Relationship, vibrational similarity in that regard. So he could connect with me easier.
Yeah. That chord was much more immediate.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's so fantastic. So I understand the heebie-jeebie because you're like, whoa, I don't remember like this being on.
I didn't know I signed up for
on
this.
The menu.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of it as a gift. Do you regard it as a gift, and can you turn it on and off, or what is your relationship to it?
1,000% I think it's a gift, and it's definitely a blessing. I will say though, I started to hear this once I started doing a lot more hypnosis sessions. When you're doing the sessions as a facilitator, much like you as the interviewer, you're asking questions, you're trying to put yourself into the situation with the individual, trying to experience that with them so that you can ask appropriate questions as an observer. And this, after, maybe a few months of doing it pretty regularly, 1 to 2 sessions a week, And they're long sessions. They can last up to 3 hours of just, or maybe 2 hours under hypnosis. I started hearing this voice calling themselves the council. And so I would ask a question, much like you would ask a question to yourself, and you'd find yourself getting an answer, mulling it over, getting an answer. Mm-hmm. I was asking questions about my life or what to do, and I would, just like having a megaphone in my head, hearing a voice responding to me saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. And I have to be honest, and I asked the voice after 2 weeks of that happening that I need to turn it off because it was driving me a little mad. And they said, okay, we'll be here when you need us. And that was that. Okay. But I will be honest and say I kind of am disappointed with myself that I did that, because now it's trickier to turn it on. Not that it's trickier for me to turn the light switch on. Not that they're gone anywhere, but I feel like you ask this question that people feel like when they have an NDE, there's a switch that gets flipped, right? Right. Yes, that flip got switched for me many years ago, but we still have the opportunity to, like a dimmer switch, dim that guy.
That's right. Yeah.
And I feel like at that moment, I really dimmed it all the way. Yeah. I should have just gone, hey, can you just give me a moment? Can you give me a few days? Rather than, I feel like in that moment, I was like, okay, enough's enough. Off. Yeah. And now it's trickier. But it's trickier for me now to get into that space. But when I do, it's just as clear.
Yeah. So I was actually right now it's serving double duty. I often interview a friend. He is a friend now, Richard Martini, and he talks about what he coined the flip side. And I'm looking at the book right now, Divine Counsels of the Afterlife. Mm-hmm. So do you know much about councils?
Yeah, I actually was just hypnotized in July and got to see them.
Oh,
and had one of the craziest experiences. I thought, like, that might be up there with leaving my body in my parents' house the first time I meditated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's stay there. So what I've learned, not just through him, but through so many people who've had NDEs and who are mediums and have a lot to say about the afterlife and why we're here. And I want to ask your perspective on this as well, especially after that experience under hypnosis, but that we all have a divine counsel 100%. That we make these agreements with. We come into the earthly incarnation to learn lessons, have experiences that we signed up for, and they are there as our guides in different capacities. And what he would say is, if you want to up that dimmer switch, just continue to ask them for help upping the dimmer switch. Like, they're right there, they're listening, talk to them. However, unsolicited words of advice to someone who's far more advanced than I. Tell me, are you open to sharing about that hypnotic experience? And
Kristin, I'm an open book. Let's
do
it.
Let's do it. I'm all ears.
Well, so I was reached out to. I'd done one previously in 2020, towards the end of my practitionership. Like, you have to do a certain amount of sessions to become a practitioner. Right. Practice sessions. So at the end of when I finished that, I wanted to try it myself. And so I had a really profound experience. It was good. It helped. But then this past July, I was reached out to by another practitioner in the area who needed more sessions to get a higher level. And she just wanted to connect. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'd love to do it. So I'll go into her place. And I had some questions because I had had some this past year, since probably last July. So July 2022, I've had some autoimmune stuff, weird health stuff, on top of the hip replacement that I had this past year. That's so yeah, and I'm like, okay, what am I doing? What am I not allowing my body where there's this resistance? And so I wanted to ask some of those questions, and it was just curious about just where I was going with my life. I felt like when I got this hip replacement, it doesn't sound pretty, but I felt like that was halftime of my life. It was the halfway mark, and my wife doesn't want to hear that, and who knows, maybe it won't be. But I felt like, okay, I'm halfway through. So where do I go with the second half of my life? And so in the hypnosis, you're still awake. You're awake. You're just in a very, theta brainwave frequency, much like we are until we're 7 years old, right? So we're in that state until we're 7. The Essene said, show me the boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. Or give me the boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man.
Oh, wow.
Because we're in that theta frequency with our brain waves until 7.
I never knew that.
And so,
I love that.
And so with hypnosis, the practices, we're trying to get into that theta frequency to access the thoughts, the memories, the images, all the things from this life and past lives and maybe future lives. But anyways, I get there, so we direct it. So I'm in that space, and you usually use this practice, and so we have you on a cloud. And so the practitioner, she starts saying, okay, are you coming off the cloud? And the first time I had done this, I had fallen from this cloud like I was a superhero. And felt so strong and had this interesting life many years ago, and hundreds of years ago. But this time, instead of going down, I felt myself getting pulled up. I thought, that's weird. So I kept going up, 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 up. And she goes, okay, are you where you're supposed to be? And I go, well, I went up instead of down, but yeah, I'm in this, and I was in a dark room, like an auditorium, circular room, and on this circular balcony was these black shadow figures with like these upturned orangey yellowish eyes. And I didn't feel scared at all, but I explained, I'm seeing these black figures with, and she goes, okay, who are they? And I go, I don't know, but it seems like a council meeting. And so as you continue to talk about this, it becomes very clear in your mind, and like things show up, and it always happens with any sequence or situation that you're in, any scene that you're in. So as I kept talking about it, maybe 2 minutes, all of a sudden the shadow figures turned into human form, right, to give my mind an understanding of what was happening.
Right.
And they all showed up, and they looked like Greek gods, if you will, in white tunics. And she said, okay, well, what are the names that you're hearing? And all of a sudden, these names just popped into my head, and it was Melchizedek, Yeshua, Sophia, Josiah. Like, there was like 10 names.
Wow.
And it just, boom, I just rattled them off real fast. So I was like, okay, I don't know who those are. And then I kept looking around, and I looked to the right, and there was Yeshua, aka Jesus, and Archangel Michael standing right next to each other. And I went, whoa. And the amount of power that came out of Archangel Michael was astonishing, because you have Jesus as this figure of just in this embodiment of love.
Yeah.
It's awe-inspiring. But then to have that, and then to have the epitome of what you would imagine as strength standing right next to, it was crazy. But anyway, so I have, when you get
I
to
love
this,
the but anyway.
yeah, I know, I just sound so,
me that.
when I verbalize it, I just sound like a crazy person in my head. Like, does anyone else feel this way, or am I just, I know I need to accept it, but I'm like, it sounds so like, I have to be honest. When I'm saying these things, I just think I accept them fully in my heart and know that they are my experience. But I know a person listening to this is going to go, what in the world is this person talking about? And I wish
don't think
everyone...
on our show.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think on
true.
our
The
show.
people listening to
people
this...
who are attracted to this show are
Totally.
drawn to these stories and having
Totally.
experiences themselves, or want more experiences like this, because they know
Absolutely.
there's truth to this.
Absolutely. You're so right. Yeah, I just think, oh, man, I just keep thinking like my 13-year-old self goes,
Oh, God, yeah.
you are such a crazy person.
What happened?
Yeah, what? Where did you go? You were going to be a professional athlete. Now you're a... Yeah, anyway.
We're speaking
Yeah, now you're talking
Michael?
who that, what? But, so then it was funny that so I went on that, and to answer the question of what I first had, like, what was my life purpose? I was now asking the questions outwardly and said, well, why am I here? She didn't even have to do anything anymore. I said, why am I here?
Yes.
And they said, because you chose to be. And so that happened, this little dialogue happened for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then my conscious mind went, and they started speaking through me. And so then she could ask the questions to them directly. And they said, we're going to take over and let Zach's conscious minds take a step to the side. He's still going to be involved and think, some of this stuff is weird, but we're going to communicate to you now. And that's very common. That happens pretty much in every session that even I facilitate. And she goes, okay, well, why is he there? And the counsel said, because he chose to be. And she said, well, can you explain that more to him? And they said, we sent out a call for somebody that we needed to fulfill a specific purpose, and he was the first one to answer it. And in my conscious mind at that time, I started getting pretty emotional because I'm like, I always imagined myself having a bit more purpose, a bit more experience, having this experience that I've had, these different experiences and the suffering that I've experienced, causing more growth for my soul and to fulfill something deeper for humanity as a whole, really.
Yeah, more profound.
Right. I shouldn't just be an exercise physiologist, right?
The
That's
guy who
part
signed
of it.
up.
Right. And so I thought, in my head, I'm not good. What can I do? I'm not good enough for that.
Yeah.
And I started getting pretty emotional and started to cry. And they said, he feels emotional because he doesn't feel worthy for this purpose. But we're not forcing this upon him. He asked for this. And that kind of ties into what you were saying with the friend of yours.
Yeah.
We didn't come because somebody forced us to.
That's right.
Everything we're living is because we chose to, within reason, right? We have specific checkpoints in our life that are imperative that we hit and that we reach, and people that we're encountering, but the rest of it is a result of who we are, right? That law of attraction, the vibrational alignment. I wasn't supposed to have road rage. It was because I was already in a space where I wasn't feeling, for better word, positive.
Yeah.
I was in a lower vibrational space. Yeah. I was in a lower emotional space. And as a result, I was getting situations that mimicked that back to me.
I think that is so true. I mean, I know that is so true.
Right. But there are things like our family, people we all agreed to choose, we all chose to be together.
Yes.
Our deep loved ones, close friends, all of those people, those are people who we've all chosen. The other acquaintances, the other friends, those are just people that happen to be on the same vibrational wavelength as us. I'm 92.1, they're 92.1, and here we come becoming friends,
Oh, I've never heard it explained like that.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
It's a radio tower that right now, we're a radio
Different
signal.
frequencies.
That's it. You're 100.1, I'm 100.1. Kristin, now we're friends and we understand each other.
Yeah.
But 100.1 is never going to understand 88.1. There's going to be too much dissonance. And so we're always in this space of, oh, well, you should change and you should change. Yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent, but
it's
in that
such
regard.
an important tangent, though.
Yeah.
That is such an important tangent. I think so many of us interpersonally and even globally are at different frequencies, tuned into different channels, and we're trying to find a collective way through.
Absolutely.
And it's incredibly challenging. So have you read much of Michael Newton's work, the Newton Institute or Life Between Lives? You
Nothing.
have to. Am I the first person who's ever said this to you?
Yes.
You have to.
Okay.
Don't go more than 2 days without taking some action on this, because Michael Newton was a psychologist or psychiatrist, one of those. And he was not spiritually inclined, wasn't into anything like that. He needed the facts, very much materialist. And someone came to him and said, hey, I know that you know some stuff about hypnosis, and I'm struggling with this, that, or the other. And he said, okay, I'll put you into a deep state. And someone went, kind of to your point, went to their counsel. And it's this idea of life between lives. It's not the past life. It's before the past life. It's the place where you make the decisions about the contracts and so forth.
Right.
So I think you will really dig it.
It sounds like David Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, it sounds exactly like that.
It's exactly the same, but he created the Newton Institute. So you have a lot of practitioners who specifically are hypnotherapists who take people into life between lives.
Okay. I think I'm sure of it, but him and Dolores Cannon, who does the quantum healing hypnosis, I'm sure they were
They were not
cohorts.
connected.
Oh, they weren't cohorts.
They
Okay.
they may have been contemporaries in
Okay.
some ways, but they were not connected.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That sounds
She
very
has a
similar.
very different. I mean, not very different. She has a very distinct, in terms of
Yeah, that's what I
talking
practice.
with.
Yeah, that's
I love that. I
yeah.
love that.
I'll
Oh
have
my
to look
gosh.
that up.
Please do. The Newton Institute.
Okay.
Yeah, and the books he's got like 4 or 5 books. I could not put, it's part of the reason I even have this podcast.
Oh, cool.
It's that fascinating. It's very
Interesting.
much like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Being able to channel the council and ask, what is this incarnation about?
Mm-hmm.
What were other incarnations? What is the purpose? So time is going by really quickly, as it
I
always
know.
does. It always does.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Tell, if you would, and I know this is the biggest question in the world, it's kind of like, okay, in the next 22 seconds, what is the meaning of life?
Oh my gosh.
No, that is not the question, but because we do suffer here and there's so much suffering happening, what have you learned through all that you have been experiencing that may be perhaps meaningful for people to understand or embrace more?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right, let's consolidate this. Let's channel the council. No, I would say suffering is momentary, right? So this will pass. Suffering is necessary to give rise to desire. So suffering to me has now become a guidepost to point me in the direction. So feeling ill, pointing me towards understanding that my inner being that's waiting for me, my future self is already waiting for me in wellness.
I love that.
Poverty, pointing me in the direction towards abundance. Loneliness, pointing me in the direction towards togetherness, oneness, connectedness, partnership. So I would say that's taught me that out of all that suffering, it was partly, like the Buddha would say, it was caused by an attachment to who I was in that moment and a dislike for the experience, right? It's just,
Yes.
I want to feel good. So when I'm sick, I'm suffering because I want to feel good.
Yes.
I want to be with a partnership. That suffering of loneliness, even though it's giving me clarity on what I want in a partnership, I'm stuck looking at the loneliness instead of taking my attention to being together. What would it look like being with my beautiful partner, cuddling, kissing, holding hands, talking? All those things. So I'd say suffering is necessary in our reality to give rise or to give us an understanding of what it is that we do want. And on a spiritual level, this is all Abraham Hicksy, but it's confirmed through all these hypnosis sessions and all my experiences. Every time I've experienced something negative, suffering, contrasting, my inner being has expanded, my future self has expanded to exactly what it is that I want. And so now it's my job to get into that frequency range with my inner being so that those things show up for me. And that's the game, like life is a game because we're here for a split second.
Yeah.
I just did a little Instagram post because I did a puzzle. It took me 4 hours to do this puzzle. And 6 other people had already taken an hour and a half to do the puzzle before me. And I didn't know how these pieces fit together, but I saw one corner, how it fit here, and one corner. And after 4 hours of work, I had this beautiful little puzzle. And it took my wife and I 2 minutes to disassemble it.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
So it really made me think like I understand the analogy. Life is a puzzle. None of these pieces make sense individually. But as you begin to put them together, it all makes sense. And that's the game, right? I have to trust that this piece is going to fit if that corner matches it, and then this piece is going to match. And I don't have to find these pieces. They're going to show up naturally.
They're going to show up. Yeah.
And it's my game of my life to put it all together. And it doesn't mean it's a predestined puzzle. It means that some of those puzzles will show up to match the corners that you're looking for.
It's a great metaphor. It's a great metaphor. And it's that idea around duality. There needs to be contrast. The sadness helps us remember love.
In this life, there has to be contrast. There cannot be that harmonious thing that we're looking for. You can be love. You can be, but even when you're love and when you're feeling grateful, and I've been, since Thanksgiving, I've been every morning, every day, just thankful, thankful, thankful. And man, I can feel myself lifting up. But guess what? When I'm driving behind somebody who's supposed to be going 10 miles faster, I have a reaction.
I know. It's really
And I'm like,
humbling, isn't it?
okay. And then I just laugh. But that's the awareness, right? That's why we meditate, to have that awareness to go,
Yes.
oh, okay, this is, and so then I go, all right, you're showing me that I don't
Yes.
want to be behind. So what I do want is it'd be so nice to drive behind people that were going the speed limit. It'd be so
Yeah.
nice to hit green lights. I don't think I've hit a red light in like 2 weeks now.
Wow.
But it's that practice. It's
That's
that
great.
game.
Well, I love that you made it so specific and so pedestrian, because I think it is this idea that we all want, I think those who are tuning in, to have a higher frequency, to
Yeah.
contribute to love consciousness. And then you get in an argument with your partner, or you're behind someone who's just the worst driver on the planet, and you're like, oh God, I'm not of love consciousness.
And it's not to do that, right? It's to experience fully the emotions that we're having. Let that be our guide, so that we can go, okay, I'm having this emotion, which means I'm disconnected from my inner being and my soul. Not disconnected. I'm in a dissonant state. I'm lower. My
Right.
inner being is here all the time, and now I'm here. So how do I work myself up? And that's through gratitude. That's through awareness. That's through the
Yeah.
joy. That's through
Through
just
compassion,
smiling.
generosity.
Compassion, yeah.
Yes, yes.
It's just a practice.
It is a practice. I love that word. It is not a perfection. It is a practice. So one more thing before we go. Have you ever seen, I think they're Buddhist monks. They do those beautifully ornate sand mandalas. The
Yes.
puzzle very much reminds me of that. And when it's done, they just,
You're the third person that's mentioned that. And I actually watched a Buddhist monk when I was in college. He came, and I don't think it's happened since, but I remember watching him do the mandala, and then it just
they're
disappeared.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
They're
no,
doing
that,
this
right?
thing.
That's the non-attachment in
Impermanence.
Buddhism. Yeah,
Yep.
impermanence, non-attachment. This body will change. This experience will change.
Yes.
It's just momentary. And if I can accept the moment for what it is fully, understand my thoughts and my emotions in that moment, be here, be alive, and then go, and then make the informed choice. And you could still make the informed choice to be angry and pissed off and sad and depressed, or you can make the informed choice to work your way up back towards a more joyful place.
Yep. That's a perfect place to stop. I want to thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing your experience and your wisdom. It was phenomenal.
Thank you very much for having me, Kristin.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.